So I watched this movie yesterday called Freaky. It's a Vince Vaughn body switching horror movie. So like, the typical body switching premise where, two very different people switch bodies and, wacky hijinks ensue. The only difference here is that it's Vince Vaughn, who's an insane murderer, like a Jason Voorhees type murderer, very aggressive and huge. And he switches bodies with a high school girl, like a little blonde high school girl. It's fantastic. It's so fun and silly. The deaths are really good. It starts right away. Like within the first, 6-7 minutes, there's, 4 or 5 just brutal murders that are very fun and, over the top and campy. But it's done really well. It's handled well. It's not constantly winking at the camera, which is often a problem with movies like this, where it's like, yeah, it's a horror movie, but everything is just kind of drenched in irony. This is not that. So not that they play it completely straight. It walks a really fine line, and it manages to do it rather well. So I highly recommend it. It's super fun. He's great. Vince Vaughn is fantastic. You kind of forget what his normal speaking voice and cadence is like as he's, in the body of this young girl. And then when he comes back at the end, you're like, oh, wow. It's good. It's interesting too. Like, I don't want anybody to freak out if I say this. Not if I'm going to say this, but like, it's playing on a couple things. Like, Vince Vaughn is obviously a huge man. He's a really big guy. And so it plays on the fact that this young woman, this young girl, all of a sudden has all of this strength and power, and she doesn't feel small and helpless and like a victim. So, which is speaking, it's speaking to, the kind of like daily insecurity or fear or a terror and or abuse that a lot of women feel at the hands of larger men. And then, she now has this power. They don't, and it's not heavy handed. They don't like, drive it into your head with a hammer or anything, but they touch on a little bit where she does say she feels powerful and, she's been bullied forever. And so it touches on all of that. But also the killer is now inside this young girl, and they're using, like, the killer is constantly, once he in her body realizes this power he has to use this girl's femininity to escape trouble. So like he'll kill people or whatever, and then cops will be there, but then the killer as the girl will scream and say somebody else did it. And then it takes all the pressure off of her, and the cops go attack whomever else. So it also speaks to that like predatory nature that a lot of women have too, but it's the opposite. And they don't have maybe the strength or physical size to dominate or intimidate or attack somebody, but they can still attack them with weapons or cause, tremendous harm, and then weaponize their womanhood, their femininity, to be like, oh, it can't be me. It's, it's someone else. I'm too small and little. So it's weird. It's playing on all these ideas about sexism and gender and, look, I mean, I've my last 3 relationships were with legitimately insane women. Like, I'm not saying that as some kind of bitter ex. I'm not. A woman who pretended to have cancer, and after she was overseas, pretended to get hit by a car and be in a coma, and was like writing me letters as posing as her friends from different email addresses, and, you know, carved a giant scar in her stomach to say that it was from a surgery in the hospital about cancer. Like, and then, you know, after that, a relationship where, you know, this woman pretended to have multiple personalities and, you know, was sexually abusive to me and incredibly mentally abusive to me. And then afterwards cried the victim to everybody else, like after I left. And to be fair, the way I left was not good, but, you know, had I been strong enough at the time to just leave, I would have left. I wasn't, ended up having an affair, was super messy. That's on me. But like, she cried the victim to everybody else. Like, and she literally says it. She said it to me once, like, why does everything bad always happen to me? Obviously she's a narcissist, right? And borderline. But cried the victim to everybody else. And so many people still to this day are like, yeah, how poor her. Even though she's still like a legitimate villain, she attacks me, tries to ruin my relationship with my son. Like, it's bad. But she weaponizes this. I mean, people have this idea that like women are victims, and there's certainly a lot a lot of women are victimized. But anyway, she weaponizes that. And then, you know, my girlfriend, something bite me on my leg. After that, pathological and compulsive liar, like, you know, that scene from Boondock Saints where the guy's like, I can't walk to the store to get a pack of smokes without running into 9 guys you fucked. You know, she's like one of those. You know, and that girlfriend, when you talk about like weaponizing that, your sexuality or your sexuality or your gender or whatever, your biological gender or whatever it is, I guess it's just sexuality. The terminology is complicated. Forgive me if I'm incorrect in some terms. They're changing a lot. It can be a challenge to know exactly the words to say. But, you know, sexually, we were, you know, very experimental and adventurous. So like a lot of very like rough sex. And, you know, if you're into that, it's fine. Obviously, there's a tremendous level of maturity that you need to be like that, because it's ultimate trust. Not only, like, you know, sex anyway is always a vulnerable activity. You're literally naked with somebody. You're also, you know, all of your insecurities are on display. And then when you add in any sort of submissive or dominant traits, there needs to be a greater level of trust, because it's not just sex anymore. Now you're incorporating like danger. So, you know, if somebody says they like this or that, and you say, okay, I will do that with you. And then you agree on like, okay, this is as far as we can go or not, or whatever, or we'll push it. But if you say this word, known as a safe word, it stops. Everything stops. So that way you're both in it together. Yeah. And, you know, a lot of times, even when people with like what people call rough sex, people assume that whoever's more submissive in that scenario is, they're the most vulnerable or the most intimate, when this is certainly not true. I mean, it's equal, but there's tremendous intimacy and vulnerability on both sides, even if you're the dominant person. Unless you're an actual, you know, shitty person and you don't give a fuck about that person. But like, you know, you're walking down a road together. So there's a tremendous trust that neither of you will hurt the other one, for real. But anyway, this ex-girlfriend, she would, you know, ask me to do certain things. And as I'm doing them, it didn't feel right. Like, are you sure this? Yeah, it's fine. Everything's fine. It's all good. Keep going. But then after, she would act like I actually hurt her. Like she would and I would keep stopping during, like, hey, are you sure you want this? Yes. Okay. But then afterwards, like, say the things I did that she asked me to do as if they were terrible. It's awful. It's tremendous manipulation and abuse. So anyway, I don't know where the fuck I was going with all that. So in this movie, they touch on that too, not from I guess from a sexual standpoint too, but it's not like there's no real sex in the movie. But they touch on that too. When the killer is inside the girl's body, he's constantly using that to do horrible things and then cry like it couldn't possibly be him. So anyway, it's a good movie. It's a lot of fun. I like how it's getting so much more common, which is obviously there's a long way to go, but it's getting so much more common to see gay characters, to see non-white characters, to see more strong women characters. It's getting so much more common. And again, it's not perfect by any means, but it has come a long way. Hollywood has not been around that long. And, there is significant change, especially within the last, let's say, 10 years, 5 years. So it's nice to see that. Obviously, non-white characters are often kind of boxed into being sidekicks, which is unfortunate. That will change too. But the two sidekicks in this movie are a gay white guy and a black girl. And they're great. So it's nice to see it, and they don't make a big deal out of it. It's not like a swishy stereotype. When you watch, especially movies from like the 80s and 90s, if you saw a gay character, they were like the most cartoonish, stereotypical, like a caricature of a gay guy. Not to say that there aren't gay guys who are very, swishy and but that is certainly one very narrow sliver of a massively large population. And just like any other group of people, it's a wide and broad spectrum full of, tons of variety. And so anyway, it's nice to see there's a gay character in this movie, one of the best friends, and he's great, really fucking funny. And there's even like the love interest, which is also not that big of a deal in the movie, which I love when they don't make it like it's a horror movie, but it's just all about this love story, or a comedy, but it's all about this love story. He's like a jock, but he's ultimately in love with, spoiler alert, this girl. And while she's in Vince Vaughn's body, there's a scene, the two of them are sitting in the back of a car talking, and he's like, now he's talking to Vince Vaughn, but like, the consciousness of this girl that he likes. And he gets to a point, he's like, is it weird that I want to kiss you? And they do kiss, which I guess maybe they said it, maybe they didn't, I don't know. But I guess this boy would have to be 18. Otherwise, there's all sorts of other issues going on there. But they do kiss. And it was, yeah, it's good. So, they challenge the jock stereotype. And there are jocks in here who are rapists, and, and they get murdered well, which is great. So it touches on all of that. It's weird for such like a seemingly innocuous, dumb horror flick, that underneath it, there is like a lot of stuff to talk about, which is cool. So I do recommend the movie. It was fun. Yeah, it was fun. What else? It's Monday. It's been 5 days, 6 days, 5 days since domestic. I read something where people were like, please don't use the word terrorist to describe these insurrectionists, these white supremacists, because terrorist is so synonymous with brown people. It's making life harder for brown people, which I understand. And again, I have no stake in that because that word doesn't affect me the same way. So, These fucking, let's just call them what they are. They're Nazis. When these Nazis stormed the castle, the Capitol. It's been, and let me be clear, they are Nazis because they're white supremacists and they're fascists. That's what the Nazi Party was. White supremacist fascists. That's what these Trump supporters are also. And people will argue, well, there are like black Trump supporters and, women Trump supporters and, well, the women thing, but there are people of color and who support Trump. Yeah, they're severely misguided. It's fucked. And it's tragic to be brainwashed in a way that you would align yourself with people who hate you and would kill you if they knew they would get away with it. I mean, I can't even imagine being a part of a group who counters, like if you are black and you're in a group who's constantly protesting Black Lives Matter, I can't imagine the feeling that person has. Like they want to belong to something. Everybody does. And this is the group that they're belonging to, but they hate you. I mean, what does that say about you? It's fucking tragic. Anyway. So it's been a week. Nothing's happened. I guess today, Pelosi and them introduced, 123 articles of impeachment. And, and the main one being incitement of insurrection. That's the big one. And evidently, the votes are there to, or the support is there to vote on it. And they're going to vote on it tomorrow. The swift justice of the U.S. government. It takes a week to get a treasonous cult leader out of the most powerful position in our country or the world after he tries to overthrow our own government. It takes a week to have a vote. It takes a week to have a vote. And it looks like the New York Bar Association is going to investigate Giuliani. It's like all of this stuff. I mean, great. Yes. Good. The Dow is suspending all PAC contributions to Republicans who supported like anti-election stuff. Great. Because that's all they care about is their fucking money and their whiteness. But like, great. But all of this stuff is so reactionary. It's just after the fact. Like it took this cult and a very aggressive and literal attempt to overthrow the government for people to be like, oh, I guess they're bad. Like it wasn't bad when they're putting babies in cages and orphaning children at the border. It wasn't bad banning Muslims for no reason other than your hatred of brown people. It wasn't bad enough when black people were being murdered in the street and in their homes unarmed for doing absolutely nothing. And this group was cheering that on. It's not bad that they're transphobic and contribute to the harassment and murders of trans people across the nation. It's not bad enough that they don't care that almost 400,000 United States, I don't like saying Americans because America's not just the United States, but it wasn't bad enough when United States residents, almost 400,000 of them have died in the last fucking year because of the coronavirus, which they don't care to do anything about. That wasn't bad. It'll be 500,000 before it's over. That wasn't bad enough to do anything. They have to storm the Capitol building, murder police officers. Then people are like, oh, I think they're bad. Parler has been this app that they've all been using to communicate. Very alt-right app, and that's where they've been organizing all their shit. And it's like, this has been known. Has anybody taken any preventative measures? No. But since Since the insurrection, now people want to look at it. So the app is taken down. Every platform took it down. The big one being, like it went off iTunes, it went off Google Play, but the big one being Amazon because they were hosting it, I guess. And it's very unlikely they'll find any kind of hosting. It would be way more work to do that, and the owners of this piece of shit thing would be losing massive amounts of money to do that. But the good thing is, hackers, before the app was taken offline yesterday, hackers downloaded everything, all the information. So when you sign up, your name, your address, your phone number, your social security number, all your posts are geotagged. So your location on your post is there. All of your posts are, of course, saved on servers, even if you delete them. That's true for anything. So they saved all that information. That'll be turned over to the FBI, Department of Justice, CIA, whomever handles all that. So there's that, which is good. We can track and find all these people. Hopefully that'll actually be done. And the FBI is trying to get a geofencing warrant for any cell phone that was inside or around the Capitol building on Wednesday. So these people literally cannot hide. And that's all good. It is. However, to quote a great song from a great band, some of those who work forces are the same that burn crosses. People are like, where the fuck were the cops when this was happening? Where was the National Guard? And, it's the same reason you don't see Batman and Bruce Wayne at the same time, or Superman and Clark Kent, Peter Parker and Spider-Man. There's a reason you don't see them at the same time. And it's even coming out now. Police departments across the nation are reporting that, yep, we are investigating a handful of police officers who were at the Capitol building involved in the insurrection. So I don't know. Schwarzenegger, former governor Schwarzenegger, gave a really beautiful speech. It's very moving. He was very personal. He shared this story about growing up in Austria. He was born in 1947, so it's just 2 years after the Second World War ends. And he shared like this really personal and touching account of being a child growing up at that time with a very abusive, alcoholic father. And he touched on something I'd never really considered. I don't think a lot of people have, that a lot of that alcoholism and abuse, and this is known, with soldiers, people who deal with that, they often are abusive and alcoholics because of the things they had to endure. It's the amount of PTSD is intense, and sometimes there's no way out. But he was talking about that was the case with his father and his neighbor's father and every father on the street, because what they saw and or what they did was so horrible. They were part of a white supremacist fascist movement, or they saw it and they can't, weren't able to. So he shared this really beautiful story and speech, and I was so conflicted. After that, he starts talking about America and our ideals and how we're such a great country. And that's when I always get turned off in these speeches, because people will talk about like, our democracy will hold, and we're such a good country and we have these values, but globally we're a tyrant. We invade countries, we murder them, we commit genocide, we remove their leaders that are helping, and we replace them with dictators who answer to us. This is why socialism always fails. Every time there's a socialist leader who's doing well, you look at Venezuela and other places as well, like we go in and first we put out a bunch of anti-whatever they are propaganda, and then we go in, we murder them and replace them with a horrible dictator who will destroy the country, but who ultimately will answer to us because we pay them. So it's tough. I'm listening to this speech from Schwarzenegger and I'm thinking like, wow, this is such a beautiful speech, and he's so impassioned, and he's delivering it so well. The words are beautiful. And then it's just like so conflicting. It's like, yeah, but all the personal stuff, I got it. No, yep. And then you start going on about how great America is. And I'm like, we're not great. We are terrorists worldwide. We just ruin other countries. Not to say there aren't other bad countries. There certainly are. But we are the worst. We're the empire. I mean, you can't truthfully argue any other point. Which is so weird. Like, we're not taught that because we live here. Our schooling is propaganda. You know, everything is not just that. I mean, it runs in parallel with one another, right? Like, America is the schooling. Like, America is white nation, and white people did all the best things. We discovered everything. We invented everything. But also that is what America is also. Like, it's a white nation, which is also not true. It's never been true. And that America does all the good things around the world. America invents democracy and all this shit, which is like, again, none of that's true. And upholds democracy and free speech and freedom and freedom and freedom and freedom. But we don't have freedom here, and we make damn sure people don't have freedom in other places. So it's just a matter of like, reality is so much based on when and where you learn something. Your entire belief structure is based on when and where you learned it. Stories get altered over time. Facts get changed, and after enough time, that becomes true. Look at anything. Every religion, just look at Christianity. That's the biggest example of like an insane change. Where it's like, this is like bastardized versions of Egyptian and Nordic religions that but that people changed to suit them, and written in fucking Hebrew and Aramaic languages people don't even understand now fully. Translated, dozens of times. Things have been omitted, added well after the fact. But enough time goes by, and now this is true. So it makes you wonder, like, about everything. Anything about any historical story you've been told. How can you be sure about any of it? Enough time goes by, the lie doesn't exist anymore. That was just the last thing recorded. So now that's true. Interesting to think about. That saying of like, perception is reality is quite true. Even here, like, our radical left wants like basic health care, like, guaranteed health care, maybe universal income, the right to choose. But in like other countries, like whatever, Germany or a lot of the countries in the Netherlands, that's like their middle. Or even their right. So again, just based on when and where you are dictates your entire belief, and yet we still operate that I'm absolutely right. No, I know. There's like 5,000 gods. You believe in one. I tweeted something the other day, but if you assume that you're right, there's a good chance you're wrong. Everybody so badly wants to be right. They don't want to understand. They just want to be right. It's insane. It's so good to have questions. But like, people have answers based on nothing other than they want it to be true. It's fucking baffling. And you can always, not always, but a good indicator is when you're having a conversation with somebody and you say something very kind of well thought out or pose a very good question, the speed in which somebody responds will let you know whether or not they're willing to think about anything or change their belief or anything. If you pose a good question, like to Trump supporters, for example, if you say, okay, all of the, I mean, you don't even need to ask these questions anymore. We don't need to keep moving the line. Like, okay, if that didn't do it, how about this? If that didn't do it, but that's where we are. So if you say to Trump supporters, okay, if after last Wednesday, your group storms the Capitol building, tries to overthrow the government, cops are murdered, they showed up with bombs and napalm and guns and zip ties. They were literally there to kill Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi. This is not speaking hyperbolically. They were literally chanting, hang Mike Pence, calling for heads on pikes. They showed up with weapons and zip ties. They were going to murder people. And you go, how can you still support? And then they immediately answer, well, because blah, blah, blah. They're not interested in listening at all. They don't want to think differently. They don't want to change. They don't want to acknowledge their choices or their behavior or their decisions. They don't want to. They can't do it. When somebody says something, you should listen to it. Even if you ultimately don't agree, take a second and think about what they said. I'm not perfect at this. Definitely not. I can be very aggressive and stubborn and bullheaded when I'm passionate about something. And I would say 5 or 6 years ago, it really dawned on me that that's how I was. And I've worked since then with every conversation, and I don't always succeed, but I've worked to change that because that's not who I want to be. When I think about a good, strong, smart man, that's not him. So I worked to change that. So, I don't know. It's just nuts, man. It's nuts. It's hard to even fathom. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's it. If you enjoy listening, please rate and review on iTunes. Take a second. If you're on iTunes, you're already here. Just go ahead and rate and review, please. And it helps. What that does is it bumps me up in the algorithm, so more people will see this in their feed, or if they're browsing for podcasts, and I might pop up, get more people listening. Same thing on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It does the exact same thing. It bumps me up in the algorithm, so I get exposed to more people. I would appreciate that. Thank you. And that'll do it. Yeah. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you're watching, I think that's all I wanted to talk about. All right. I'll see you guys next Tuesday. Peace.